So welcome to a new episode of Poker Therapy with my friend Andy Black in Ireland, and I am actually in London. So how has your week been, Andy?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I feel a bit stressed today because I'm heading into the world of technology and social media and all this kind of stuff, and it's kind of new to me, you know. So it's all a bit kind of stressful. And one of the things I'd like to do at the start of these shows is just check in with how we are, which is kind of the first thing. It's good for everyone to do that. So while people are listening to it, let's see this first minute or two, even though we're speaking, you know, maybe check in with how you are. You know, if you're with somebody, maybe, you know, say, hey, how are you? Don't bother listening to us, you know. And, you know, I'm a little bit stressed today, but I am pretty excited about doing this. And it's amazing that once you start doing something, it starts developing. So even though I've been planning for this for a decade at least, already, you know, things that have happened like Stephen Chidwicks' post and Mizrachi winning the main event, Leo Margette's getting close. All of that has happened in the last kind of week or so. The fallout from Will Kassouf being led away. And it all feels like they're all subjects for poker therapy.
For sure, it's so interesting to look into it because it's a mind game. It's poker is of course very interesting to look at, and there's so many examples of where therapy is needed in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, and for therapy, it's like I struggle with the word for this. I came up with this, but let's see it as more back to front. That, you know, you could regard anything which affects you being well and present as something to do with therapy, or even anything which I was watching the golf over the weekend, and the other golfers who are obviously incredibly high performers, and basically we're talking about Scotty Scheffler, who won the British Open, as if he's on a different level. So from a certain point of view, you know, they all require a bit of therapy. And then even Scotty Scheffler, who won the thing earlier in the week, he was saying, well, you know, maybe it's not that important. I only get like a little bit of a buzz, you know, when I win it. Is it worth it, you know? So even Scotty is kind of like, you know, he's in a, you know, this therapeutic question, you know. So let's look at it like that, and then let's just be very clear that the whole point of this show is to either help people with their poker in their life, either by talking to them individually or because they identify or relate to one or a number of the subjects on the show.
I think also it's very important to understand, we talked about it several times, Andy, that if you're a poker player and need the kind of therapy we're talking about, it's also applicable to the way of life. And we're also going to have a very interesting guest today that has helped you out in that. Can you just shortly tell me about the guest?
Well, Donald, we started meditating together. We were literally within weeks of each other at a meditation class in 96, 97. And then 8 years later, after I'd been in the kind of monastery for 5 years, we re-hooked up again, and he came over to the World Series as my kind of spiritual, mental, coachy type person. And yeah, we traveled with each other for a few years, but within 2 or 3 weeks of him coming over, you know, I turned fresh air into a few million, you know. And then we've explored that ever since. And he is president of Yoga Ireland. He's been teaching meditation for the last 20 years. And he's got a particular focus on the connection between the body and the mind. But also we have a history going back where he was actually at the World Series dealing with, you know, whatever he observed, etc., and dealing with me, you know, and I'm a bit of a prima donna, to be honest with you, you know. So it wasn't easy, you know. So I'm looking forward to him coming along. In a way, it's like an X-Men or Superman origin story. you know, he was there at the beginning whenever I predicted that this kind of stuff would become standard 20 years ago. It's the 20th anniversary of when we started working on this kind of stuff.
No, I remember watching one of my friends actually, Ian Alsansak, was at the final table. He was a good friend of mine, and also it was the year Joe Hashim won it, and that was actually my first year properly working with poker. So my first year when we met was in, I think, December or November in 2005, just after your successful. Don't you have a picture of that year in the World Series?
I just so happened to do it. We were setting up. Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I'm setting up the old Poker Therapy studio. We'll gradually build it over the next while to look cool. But look at that good-looking lad with very high chips. And actually, at that table, there was maybe, I don't know, 30 or 40 people left, or 50 people left in the main event in 2005. And I think you can see the back of John Joanda's head, who was obviously one of the all-time greats. And at the time, you know, he was regarded as the best pre-flop player in the world. And I felt I was better at him than him. So a lot of my success was down to my skill at the first two cards. After that, I'm a bit dodgy, really, you know. So, and also at that table was Mike Mattisau, Greg Raymer, Howard Lederer. You can't actually see them, but it was some table. And everyone was sporting their full tilt gear. So it's like you had this full tilt sort of white Harlem Globetrotters basketball team with John Joanda providing a little bit of color because his origin is the Philippines, you know. So, that is a picture.
Yeah, I remember seeing you, watching you, following you. Did you come in at the final table as a ship leader that year, 2005? No, second?
Well, I had the chip lead, but then I threw away most of my chips in a stupid pot, so I came in second or third. Okay. Then I got it back again, and then I kind of threw them all away again.
Would you say were you cracking up, as we said? Like we saw some players did this year.
Yeah, I basically cracked up, and that's kind of the reason why I understand cracking up. I've never heard anyone tell me a story about cracking up that's worse than my top 10.
Mm. Yeah, I actually I watched. I don't remember if it was 2007, 8. Jerry Yang year. There was a guy from Denmark called Philip Hilm.
Yes.
And he was maybe the poster boy for cracking up in a way, because he was in the ship lead. He was just taking him on and just lost it all. And I think he came in as a ship leader and went out 9th.
Yeah. I mean, I think one hand it was a little bit tricky, but another one was a complete blow up. And it just shows. I mean, every year pretty much people crack up. Every tournament, you could say, the number of people that crack up is, it's very consistent. At this year's World Series final table, there was a lot of cold decks from 9 to kind of 4, where they were just standard hands. There was 2 pairs against 2 overcards, blind on blind. Leo Margetts and I think Mingini got knocked out like that. Then the first guy got knocked out when he flopped top pair, and there was a set against him, top pair with an ace, top. But then the last 4 players, arguably, there were crack-ups. Sort of.
Yeah, for sure.
There were crack-ups. There was a guy called with 10-6 when they were 3-handed. Heads up. It happened so quickly. But what you notice about all of these crack-ups is, I'd say 80-90% of them, is they happen within about a second or 2. So I think Philip Hilm took a longer time to make his crack-ups. But a lot of people's crack-ups, they happen really, really quickly. So it's as if their mind goes, and then all of a sudden they do something very quickly. I know a lot of my crack-ups, they happened within 2 or 3 seconds. So pause.
Yeah, I think that's the most important bit. And it's, of course, they've been playing, I don't know, 70, 80, 90 hours or whatever to get there. And I mean, there's a limit to the brain, and especially when you're running on turbo, like you do for several bets of the tournament. And maybe Mizrachi is the best example, who's running on economy fuel, because he doesn't drain
Yeah.
himself in the same way that other people do. Maybe. What do you say about that?
Yeah. Well, look, I don't think that there's a limit to the brain. I think in practical terms, it seems like there is, which is almost exactly the same. But, Mizrachi was a good example in this terms of somebody who seemed the same when he was at 3 blinds and when he was, he had 100 blinds. Now, his mind was still gone. In the final hand, he couldn't even read the board. He was going, oh, he's got a pair. Oh, yeah. So it's almost like an unimportant bit of his mind, which was reading the board when the money was all in. I heard no one else comment about this. So he just kind of went, oh, he thought the other guy was drawing dead. He thought he just had a 9. He then eventually realized he'd 2 pair, and even when he spoke about it afterwards. But you know what's interesting about that? It's almost like he diverted all his calmness into the really important stuff. And then something
and
something
suddenly
like reading the hand, well, it doesn't matter. It's like he turned off. He was off partying. It didn't matter. There was nothing he could do about it, yeah? So even though it seemed a bit odd, it was illustrative. So what's important, I think, is that Mizrachi is a good example of somebody who doesn't allow that much to affect him. And he does it in a way by being himself. So if somebody else tried to be like Mizrachi, that would be usually, a mistake, unless you were actually like Michael Mizrachi, which is probably pretty unlikely. So he, so the question again starts off with, how are you?
That's a good question. It usually is a good question, and if you, when you say it, you don't answer it to the person who asked the question. You also have to listen to what yourself is saying.
Yeah,
so,
and
then understand that.
Yeah, and sometimes when we ask a question, whether in any form of therapy or counseling or coaching, anyone who's done this kind of stuff, either in whichever seat you're in, that often, there's this idea that, oh, your first thought is your best thought. But often that's not the case, yeah? It's almost like your first thought, true as you might be, may not be what you need to get at. So it's often a bit deeper. So you kind of have to ask yourself the right kind of questions, and you have to find a way to tune in to how you actually are. And that is the interesting fork in the road, because there are 100,000 different methods to tune in to how you are. And the biggest danger to tuning into how you are is if you tune into how you are and then you start thinking, hey, that's how I am all the time.
Yeah.
So presence essentially is all about remembering how you are right now.
And I think maybe Michael Mizrachi is the one who is more closest to that, to be honest. And we've seen some good examples as well. When we look at poker players and we think he knows exactly where he is. And Stephen Chidwicks is a good example of that. Maybe the most feared player. He looks absolutely calm. And we found out that maybe he isn't, and maybe hasn't been all the time by the Twitter posts or X posts.
Well, in some ways, when you ask me how I am, when I read, now I don't really, I'm not doing X and Twitter and social media and stuff, which was, funnily enough, one of the things he said in his post. He doesn't do a lot of that. But recently I've just started looking into doing that, just in connection with this show. And it doesn't excite me. I'm a bit worried about it. But somehow this was sent to me. I think poker.org sent it to me because I was in their VIP room doing some coaching and interviewing during the summer. And they sent it to me, and it was his X post, and it blew my mind. In fact, it left me quite raw, quite vulnerable, quite unsettled. And in some ways, I was thinking of reading it all out. As you know, I was speaking to you and said, oh no, it's too long or whatever, In a way, I think you were right, but for the wrong reasons. I think it's better if people go and read Stephen Chidwicks' post. There's an awful lot in it, and I'm just going to touch on a few bits of it. So first of all, Stephen, hopefully we'll get Stephen on the show at some point in the future. But well done, Stephen. So there's lots of elements. So I'll only touch on a few. I'm not trying to summarize the post, but basically, I'll tell one small story from it, which maybe illustrates a big bit of it, and that is that often. So he said, "Look, I may be bipolar. I may be ASD. I have various kind of mental issues, which have profoundly made me real problems socially, engaging, have profound mental responses internally." And this one story will illustrate. So guys would look at him and they kind of go, his peers would go, "This is the hardest ice cold man on the planet. He is Mr. Ice. He's Mr. Composed, etc., etc." But like, the great icebergs, what was going on underneath? And we're all a bit like this. So he said that sometimes at the end of a big poker session, he would go to bed hungry because he could not face a potential another human interaction with another person, because it might just send him into a horrific mental state. So rather than actually eating, he would go to bed. Now, that should illustrate, a good sense of what Stephen was actually dealing with. Now, and recently, what he's done is he started, as he described, looking at the layers and layers of stuff, which have led to this, and starting to feel essentially more comfortable with himself, to a point where he says, well, look, I might engage a little bit in social media. He's actually expressed what's been happening, and he's opened the door to a kind of different him. He says that it's improved relations with his family, etc., etc. He used one phrase which I was gonna explore regularly on this show, which is looking at the shadow.
Oh, you mentioned that the shadow. Yeah, why is that important, and can you explain that to someone?
Let's say a shadow is a very evocative image if you think about it. So, often when I walk along with my kids, kids get very excited by shadows. And it's like you, and it's sort of attached to you. So I think the word shadow is not just, your dark side. It's sort of somehow something which is connected to you. So you think a way about this yourself, yeah? So by exploring your shadow, you're exploring all of you, because we all have shadows. So, but what we mostly do whenever we're doing the Will Kasoof, essentially is, sorry, Will, but you're the poster boy for this, and until you turn around and say, I don't want to hurt people mental health-wise in poker games again, then I will use you as an example, yeah? Because that's what you're saying. But and what's going on for you underneath, Will, yeah, or any of us when we're acting poorly, is we're more concerned with attacking and hurting other people than looking at improving our own wellness. So we make a choice in the road to not look at our shadow. Yeah? Now, there's so many different ways of looking at this. I've seen people who are in groups that only look at their shadow, but they actually dismiss the way that other people look at their shadow. and that becomes a shadow. So Stephen using that language, I felt from a personal point of view, from an outsider's point of view, it really felt that he was on the right track, and he feels he's on the right track. He's also going at his own pace. He said, look, if I don't respond to, and it's not like I'm turning into, I'm going to respond to everyone now. I'm opening up about what's been going on for me, and I'm on the road. I'm on the path, so to speak. And in a way, being on the path and trying is all that's required, in my opinion.
Right,
Being
right.
on the path and trying. Will
Yeah.
is not on the path,
Yet.
and he's not trying. Ultimately, why Stephen's post is so profound is he's got lesson number 1 correct, which is you're actually attempting to look at your own shit. Well, another interesting thing about Stephen's post is he said, I'm not going to discuss the label thing right now. Now, I have views on labels. The label thing is, just because you label something doesn't mean that you're on the road to actually working with it effectively. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. So people get very addicted to either being in the labeling crowd or the not labeling crowd. And it's not the right question. You know, the question is what works, what is exactly happening when you label that individual person, what is the effect, what else is happening around that. It's a much bigger question. But people like keeping their jobs and they like being in charge. So they're either in the labeling group or the not labeling group. And I would say that's interesting. So what do you mean by that? And I'd say if 100 people in the labeling group, I'd probably find 100 different answers, and vice versa. You know. So these are big subjects. I mean, but well done, Stephen. I mean, I was deeply moved by his post, and basically, if Stephen Chidwick is struggling with stuff. I mean, what he did was he managed to become one of the best poker players in the world despite that. So, wow. So anyone else out there who's struggling, you know, sometimes you just get on with what you're doing, and then sometimes you look at your own stuff. And it's hard to say which is best for you. You know what it is? Go back to the Will Cassou for the Stephen Chidwick. I think what we all have to ask ourselves a question, say about the Cassou incident, wherever we stand on it, it's easy to have a position on something, whatever that position is. Truly exploring yourself and the present moment is looking at the unknown, the shadow, and what you do know about yourself and letting it go.
Yeah.
So it's not, you know, the idea of certainty, which I think Donald was hitting on, was the idea of knowing, of opinions, of this is how it is, which there's a lot of pressure to present oneself like that in the world and then surround yourself with people who agree with you. You know, there is a growing sense in the world that that's the problem.
Right.
You know,
it's not only poker; it's all over the world.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, and you know, so if you ask yourself that question, you know, the answer that comes back, if you ask it honestly, might be uncomfortable. Whatever your views are about whatever, you know, and I think the spiritual journey, whether you're a Christian or a Muslim or an atheist or a humanist or a Buddhist, in some ways, if you look at the scriptures in all of those religions, let's call them, and I include atheism as a religion, they all pointed the need for inquiry.
Right.
But all of them can have the difficulty of saying, this is the answer. This is how it is. Think like this. And I think regardless of the wisdom in each of those areas, there's wisdom in science, there's wisdom in the Muslim religion, there's wisdom in Buddhism. It's easy to become rigid.
Right.
As opposed to
which is bad.
Trying to build up your confidence,
right,
which is a different thing. And that's really what I would like to respect on this show.
Right.
And I'm sure I will regularly fall short. And hopefully if people pull me up on it, I'll be a good example of someone who goes, yeah, fair enough.
Good. Now this is the week after the World Series of Poker main event. We had some really good stories. We're going to talk about them again because it's kind of a off season after the World Series for quite a few players. There's going to be a series soon again. The European Poker Tour will start. There will be players and online tournaments and so on. So there's always plenty to talk about. But I think our goal for this podcast is also to be, timeless. We talk about being in the moment, but we would like to talk about subjects that isn't tied to something that happens now or just recently. This can be looked at and listened to also in the future, hopefully. Well, don't you think so, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, as we bring more and more people on, I'll be doing some coaching. We'll be broadening out to different areas. We'll explore all sorts of people's interests. You begin to build up a picture of a whole load of things which help people get in this territory of looking at things. Yeah, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to introduce all sorts of possible techniques and stuff like that. I mean, I'm just going to allow this to happen kind of organically.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what's going to happen with this, but there's no doubt that there's a lot of stuff. I mean, maybe next week it's just coming to me. Let's explore one of my great difficulties, which is the pause.
It's underestimated.
So, it's underestimated, but Kenny Hallard, when he lost half his stack to Mizrachi, his decision was really a bit too quick. And there was 3 Broadway cards up there, and he called with top pair, and that brought him back to the pack. It was worth millions. It gave him he went from 40, 50 big blinds to 20 big blinds. Then also the guy who finished third made a snap call off the big blind all in for 10 big blinds with 10-6 suited. And then the guy who finished second, he did a similar thing again. That might be the King Deuce hand. But my memory of the hands isn't exact, but there were 3 examples in the biggest tournament of the year, in the second, third, and fourth finishers, where they all didn't pause.
Right. So that might be the subject of the next week.
Let's maybe explore pausing next week.
Excellent. All right. Enjoy your week, and it was a great talk again, Andy. Looking forward to next week. So see you then. Take care. So any final words, Andy?
May you be well and happy.
Yeah. And remember to ask people, how are you? How are you doing?
Yeah, how are you?
Yeah, how are you? That's a good ending. Okay, see you next week, Andy. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Schulzen she's out 3 long over Ireland, he belongs to Rogers. Schul at the wheel, castle and the house, Claydas, banning their boon to the Bjorksus, Clockcogs, Watches, Swing, of Sugar, you know, like Scotch, that high. Sound like a dish, get down the 3 dag and out right to the 5 and a cross, I'm a chalet. Oh yeah, chalet. Oh yeah, chalet, chalet. And I saw two so long, the Atlantis came all around to loving us on. Well, come on, the mission, I have right to the cool. She was a ton of that guy, Bjorksus, spoiled the card, the loves, the like, Donna, my sponsors, cause she's shield. Gach, chance, the boss, and the flound of the hard, and cost point, the